Welcome to the Mental Health Takeaways podcast, where we aim to deliver engaging conversation about men's mental health so that more men will engage. We've got a really action-packed episode with a very good friend of mine. It's well worth tuning in for. You'll get to meet Aaron, find out a little bit more about him, which will include finding out what's going on here.
I consider myself a very calm person. I've got an extremely long fuse. When I do snap, it's a little bit scary and weird, but it only happens about 2 or 3 times a year. So whereas I am like a child and I get excited pretty much about 50 times a day. So I'd be walking around barking most of the day.
He's also going to talk to us about his back injury that he suffered many years ago, over 10 years ago now. A serious back injury caused him lots of problems physically, but also mentally. And really importantly, he's going to talk to you about that process of recovery. Here's a little snippet about what he has to say about that.
For some reason, what happened to me was pretty debilitating. I ended up in hospital a few times. I ended up one morning, woke up and I couldn't feel my legs. I sort of crawled across the floor. I was alone at that time. I crawled across the floor to try and get to the door, pulled myself up using the door handle and the sort of side of the table and sort of let go and just collapsed on the floor.
And as well as that, we're going to touch on things like body image. We're going to talk about Aaron's perception of himself as a skinny man and potentially the perception of others. We're going to talk about the Sunday scaries. I think everybody can relate to those. We're also going to be introduced to Dino, Aaron's chimp. Check this out.
Stephen Peters, he calls it the chimp. And sometimes when people are being, quite frankly, a bit of a dick, I've learned to say to myself, well, that's not actually how they choose to behave. That's their chimp behaving. That's their sort of primitive emotional side. And when you can start to be in control and kind of say, like, I'm going to control the situation. This person's being unreasonable. There's no point bringing my chimp out to defend myself or get into a battle.
And then we're going to go on to talk about creating a safe environment for men to be able to talk and to be able to be heard. We'll talk about some experience around Talk Club, and Nibo's going to share a little bit about that and his experiences. We're going to talk about a positive mindset and some of the things that Aaron does to maintain that, some tips and tricks that he's learned along the way, how he manages to block out those negatives and really focus in on those positive things that are going on. We're going to talk about SEAL drama, and you're going to find out what Aaron likes to stuff down his wetsuit. Back in his youth, like surfing for 8 hours within a day would be something that Aaron would do, like a full work day of surfing. And you used to stuff Mars bars down your wetsuit, didn't you?
What, for the purpose of looking
Energy.
better in a wetsuit? Or
Well, no, it was down the back. Like I was known to stuff some supplies to keep me going because I didn't want to have to get out. But
Check it out. Enjoy the episode, guys.
the purpose of us being here is to have a conversation that might touch on the subject of mental health and your experiences of mental health. But sometimes when we use that phrase mental health, people shut down a bit. So if it's easier for you to think of it as thoughts, feelings, emotions and experiences, either yours or other people's, that can be a good way to think of it too. And an easy conversation starter that actually includes lots of factors that affect people's mental health is takeaways. So if I were to ask you, you can have a takeaway now, what would you order? And then we'll go into some questions about around that takeaway, and those questions will touch on the factors that affect people's mental health. So let's ask you that question. If you could order a takeaway, what would you go for? Tell us about that.
The obvious choice for me is an Indian, because that's pretty much the only takeaway I get. Although we don't really do takeaways, it's more of a sort of eat in, but I'd still call that a takeaway, if you know what I mean. But there is another option of a fish and chips set on the seafront. But I'm going to go, because you're going to buy it for me, I'm going to go for an Indian takeaway because it's an event. I say it's a treat. It has emotive memories going back to university days, and then in my 20s, Sunday nights after a weekend having beers. And now, more recently, we've had some sit-in curries with the family. I've got 2 boys, 9 and 6, and my wife, and the 4 of us have gone out, and it's like a new world for the boys. We went for a buffet one where they could go up and open the lid of the silver hot pans and see what's underneath, which I don't think anyone knows. But it's pretty cool. Breaking up the poppadoms. It's a full-on experience. And I'm not much of a drinker, but it's like having chips without ketchup. You have a curry, you've got to have a beer. So it's a little treat for me. And I just think also, like, having a curry, it is an experience, but I'm quite a wired person, and it is actually one of the rare times when I'll probably unwind a little bit and switch off and just immerse myself in that, diving into that sort of food, which I pretend I know about, but I have absolutely no clue what it is.
And do you think that's because of the type of food or because of the occasion? Why is it that it helps you to unwind?
I think it's a bit of all of it, really. I think, like I say, like thinking back, obviously I've listened to a few of your previous shows, and it's been helpful to kind of like hear the sort of the format and stuff. But so I was thinking on this takeaway question, and when we sort of spoke previously about this, I kind of said, "Well, I don't do takeaways," which is a bit of a crap answer. But think about it, we do have the occasional one, and then I was thinking more, and with the curry, the Indian, I think because it is an event. It's not so much the food; it's an event, and it is. I know it sounds silly, but we're in Cornwall. It is a little bit like, it's an experience that's a little bit different from your Cornish pasty.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from there. Are you normally in that mindset of food as fuel or food as entertainment, or are you somewhere in between? Because I know people in both camps, and I wondered which one you are.
I'm a hungry horse. I never stop eating, and I have been known to say that eating is an inconvenience, which sounds terrible because I do love the taste of food, but it is sometimes I'm just like, oh shit, I've got to eat again.
Yeah.
So it depends what mood I'm in, to be honest, because there's certain foods I love the taste of. But to be honest, when I was a young single man in my 20s, I literally just cooked the blandest, plainest food just to get that fuel in.
So maybe for you with the curries, it's that switch up between food going from being a fuel to being entertainment and a family event. You said you take the 2 boys with you.
Yeah.
Do you get into that sometimes slightly toxic cycle of trying to get the hottest curry you can and show how manly you are by gargling with a vindaloo?
Well, so I see the boys are young enough for me to get a korma and tell them it's the hottest on the menu. Just act a little bit sweaty, it's fine. But no, I like spice. I put sriracha sauce on pretty much most dishes at home. So I like a bit of kick, but not too hot. I'm sort of middle of the road man. As soon as someone serious comes along, then I panic.
Okay.
Yeah. I like to be able to taste it.
And you said, so you'd go for a korma. What else would you?
No, I wouldn't really go for korma.
Oh, you wouldn't?
No, I would go. I like the dishes that I don't know what you really call most of them, to be honest, but I read what's in them. I like the quite dry ones with like all the vegetables and the rice all mixed in, where you can kind of pour the sauce on top.
Oh God. Always talking about a curry makes me crave.
Makes you hungry.
A curry, like really crave one. So what goes with the curry, Aaron? Would you get all the bits and bobs on the side?
Poppadoms, probably just poppadoms with the sauces. I love the hot lime thingy.
Yes.
That goes with that you can taste for about 3 days after still.
Yeah.
It's got a couple of poppadoms, and just maybe like a naan bread. That would do.
Which naan though? Garlic naan, plain naan, keema naan, Peshwari naan?
I like the coconut flavoured one.
Yeah, is that Peshwari?
Peshwari, yeah.
That is good.
Peshwari naan. And do you tell the boys that's spicy as well?
Only if they're not going to try any.
Good job. One more question I'd like to ask before we move on. You said you used to go for a curry on a Sunday night in your, do you say in your 20s?
Yeah.
What was that all about? I'd love a bit of that.
So I moved to Perranporth in my early 20s after university, and got together with my now wife Becky, and we'd always go out every Saturday night, drink too much. It was a big group of friends. She had a good group of sort of friends living here then. And they did like an all-you-can-eat buffet on a Sunday night, and it was almost like a tradition. You know, hair the dog, have a pint, and literally all you can on a Sunday night. So it was a nice way to round off the weekend. And I think Brad, you probably accompanied me on a few of those.
Yeah,
Well.
I probably came to a few of those, and yeah, I think you're kind of showing how you've got wiser as the years have gone on. Because I do remember you reminded me of a couple of things when you were talking then. I do remember once being sat in a curry house with you, and sort of questioning if the curry didn't make you sweat, then what was the point? And you would always go for the hottest one, and I'd be there with my chicken korma, probably with Jace with his chicken korma as well. And the other story that it made me think of was when you talked about food being an inconvenience. Is it because you just used to spend so much time playing Nibbo, there would be back in his youth. Like surfing for 8 hours within a day would be something that Aaron would do, like a full work day of surfing. And you used to stuff Mars bars down your wetsuit, didn't you?
What, for the purpose of looking
Energy.
better in a wetsuit, or?
Well, no, it was down the back, which, like I was known to stuff some supplies to keep me going because I didn't want to have to get out. But
Aaron, one thing I'm interested in, and it's a bit of a modern 2024, maybe 2023 phrase, is the idea of the Sunday scaries. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's people finishing a weekend, having had a lovely weekend, and then thinking, oh shit, it's Monday tomorrow, and then having to get back into work mode. Those of us that work Monday to Friday, and I wondered if the Sunday night curry was a good way to fight those Sunday scaries, or if you'd recommend it, if anyone's kind of feeling that. Because for a lot of people, they get to that point in the week, Sunday afternoon, evening, where they're starting to think, oh, bollocks, I really don't want to be going back to work.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, not now. I mean, I'm super lucky. Like, I've had a job, worked for the same company now since 2008, and I've never had that going back to work on that sort of like Monday, which is seriously cool. And in fact, I work about every weekends now. We've sort of like had remote working. I sort of juggle work a bit more. Really lucky to have that good work-life balance. So sometimes when the kids come home from school, I might sort of like steal a little bit of my work time, but then the weekends I'll do it. So I did a little bit this morning and yesterday morning. But anyway, I don't vote straight. But in my 20s, for sure, I think you've had a great weekend. You wake up with your hangover, and then you're thinking, oh, I've got work the next day. And Sunday can almost be like a dread day. And I remember as a child, I hated Sundays because you're worrying about going back to school, which is stupid. And it was only, I think, in my sort of like, well, after university, starting to work, you can start to embrace Sundays and actually enjoy them. But you've got to pack them full of stuff. You're not sitting there sort of waiting for what's coming the following day. So, yeah, if you don't like your Monday mornings, do something decent on Sunday night. You still got something to look forward to.
And what's more decent than a curry? Aaron, I'm going to dial that curry in.
Nice.
We'll dial it in. We still don't have a name for the curry, but dry curry, poppadoms, all the sauces, Peshwari naan.
I'm sure if we ask, they can recommend something.
Yeah, we'll take the house recommendation on that. So we'll dial in that curry, and then we'll carry on the chat and see where we end up.
Sounds good.
Yeah, cool. I like that little thing about the Sundays. I think, obviously Nibbo and I both backgrounds in teachers, and I know having worked with a lot of teachers, often people write off a Sunday, don't they? They're like, oh, it gets written off. Where actually just that little nugget of like, actually, no, change the way you view your Sundays and do something fun. Anyway.
Well, I mean, just on that note, I'm getting older by the day. I feel really old today. But I find if you do anything on the Friday night, your weekend feels way longer.
Yeah.
Even if it's a kid's thing. If it's my favourite thing to do with the kids is get a pizza on a Friday night, and then we'll have a pizza and a movie, and that just makes the weekend feel way longer when you stretch it out at that end, and then same with the Sunday. Anyway, sorry, Brandon.
Okay, cool. Right, let's get into the serious nitty-gritty then here, Hutch. Your first would you rather, okay? So, thinking very carefully about this. Would you rather have steam come out of your ears like a train every time you're mad, or bark like a dog every time you're excited?
Well, it's going to be relatively easy for me to answer based on how I perceive my personality,
Yep.
and which is going to happen more frequently. But just for entertainment purposes, firstly, I'm going to consider if they happened on equal amounts, which would I rather?
Do they happen in equal amounts?
Not for me, they don't know. I consider myself a very calm person. I've got an extremely long fuse. When I do snap, it's a little bit scary and weird, but it only happens about 2 or 3 times a year. So, whereas I am like a child and I get excited pretty much about 50 times a day. So I'd be walking around barking most of the day. So I think it's easily going to be steam out of my ears for that reason. I mean, party trick wise, that'd be pretty impressive as well. But it'd be quite annoying that you'd have to get someone to piss you off for steam start coming out of your ears. But this would be quite cool. But I think even if they did happen in equal measures, the sort of the anger or the annoyed, was it annoyed or anger?
It was mad. It was just mad.
Mad.
So,
See, I'm excited at the thought. I've already forgotten the question, but all the excitement. I would still go for steam, I think, because it's a silent thing. You could probably disguise it.
I mean, you're wearing headphones right now.
That's it.
Yeah.
They just go like that.
It depends what sort of dog I'm going to take on as well, because you get some of those really annoying yappy ones or some really sort of manly ones. But people often say, "Hey, if you were a dog, what would you be?" And I never normally get the chance to answer that question, because people normally tell me that I'd be a whippet based on my slender frame. So I'm not too sure what a whippet barks like, but I guess I'd have to have that sort of bark. So
okay,
I'm imagining it's a little bit pathetic.
I mean, there's one question that I want to ask on the back of that, and then I'm sure Brad will probably want to come into the whippet thing. But the whole reason that we start with silly would you rathers, I mean, there's lots of reasons why we do it, but there's actually stuff in there that we can kind of start to, with our friends, with our family, with people that we want to have conversations with around their mental health. There's stuff in there. And the thing that is in there for me, from what you've just said, is that you've got a really long fuse. So what's the story behind that? Is it that you're just actually not getting pissed off? Is it that you are getting pissed off, but you're swallowing it and you're just holding it in? Brad mentioned already that he and I are teachers. And one of the things that I was taught on my teacher training was that pretend to be cross before you actually end up cross. So if you feel yourself starting to bubble up as a teacher and you need to kind of blow off a bit of steam, blow off that steam really early, because then you're still in control. Actually pretend like, oh, you've really let me down, when you're not actually feeling cross, but you could feel it creeping up. Rather than letting it actually bubble over and then you've lost control and you're losing your shit at a kid, and that's just not good for anyone. So what's the story behind your long fuse?
I think a lot of it is just like how you made up, isn't it, really? But I think a lot of it, I mean, Brad, you'll probably have to reflect back on our 25 plus years of friendship as to whether it has changed over time. But I think also you learn. I think the two biggest things is in a work environment and as a parent. There's nothing I hate more than blowing up at my kids because you just regret it. Making your own child cry is not a nice thing. And I think our generation of parenting is so different from our parents' generation. We're really soft. I'm not sure whether it's good or bad. Yeah, we'll have to see how they will turn out. But we don't shout at our kids. We reason with our kids, or we're supposed to. But every so often you do lose your fuse, and you're like, well, that was pretty counterproductive. So you I think you learn. I've done a lot of work on my mental health and understanding myself, and I think a lot of that is learning about people's personalities, because you can't learn about your own until you understand that everybody has different personalities and how they're made up. And one of the big things that you guys are probably aware of, and other people may be aware of, is this idea of the Chimp Paradox by Stephen. I forgot his surname. I mean, it's very, very big book, but everything that I've experienced, the hypnotherapy I had with Brad, I've had some counselling as well, it all actually gears back to this idea that there's everybody's brain has two parts to it. Your primitive emotional and then your intellectual. But Stephen Peters, that's it. Stephen Peters, Professor Stephen Peters. He calls it the chimp. And sometimes when people are being, quite frankly, a bit of a dick, I've learned to say to myself, well, that's not actually how they choose to behave. That's their chimp behaving. That's their sort of primitive emotional side. And when you can start to be in control and kind of say, like, I'm going to control the situation. This person's being unreasonable. There's no point bringing my chimp out to defend myself or get into a battle. And therefore, by not sort of riling up for the fight, when it's half the time it's pointless, you don't end up getting mad and you can control that. And I found that really something I've worked on really hard at work. We're a really small team and we're very passionate. And in the early days, I had quite a few heated conversations that were all for the greater good. We wanted the same common goal, but you come away from it thinking, God, I wish I hadn't have sort of behaved like that. I was just like stupid, and you'd each end up apologising, whatever else. And hey, these things still happen every so often, but I think I catch myself, and I know that the person I'm speaking to 99% of the time doesn't want to behave like that. And so I'll approach the conversation with them at a time in a different way when no one's chimp's coming out, and we're both sort of acting with our intellectual mind, really. And I think, therefore, I can recognise I don't consider myself a coward, and I won't stand down. I'll stand up for myself if there's a situation I need to there and then. But I think most of the time, there's no need for myself to get upset, wound up, angry, and then regret my actions in a situation which can be a topic which can be addressed at a later date, basically. So
yeah. Strong answer, Aaron. I like that very much.
Yeah, cool. I want to come back to something. And
you're going to see me get really pissed off later on, by the way, when we start talking over me or something.
The thing I want to come back to, which brings us really nicely into a bit of context for our listeners and as to why you're on the show, because you talked about I don't know what type of dog I'd be, and people would always say to you, you'd be a whippet because of your slender frame. And you also talked about what they might sound like and would they be wimpy. And so I think it's probably a good opportunity for you just to maybe share a little bit of background into, the struggles that maybe you've had in the past in terms of your back and the impact of that, but also this idea of being the whippet.
Mm-hmm. Woof.
that covers it. I mean, next question.
Yeah. So look, I mean, this is such a huge, deep, long sort of topic, which you may have to interrupt me on to sort of get things back on track. But I'll try and sort of give a sort of a high level view of what happened. So in my 20s, I was absolutely living the dream. I had a reasonably good job. I had my now wife. I had a great group of friends. As Brad said, I was pretty much surfing like 30 hours a week. And I was like so happy, super, super happy. And then our other big hobby was mountain biking. And I had a crash on a mountain bike, and basically it led to prolapse disc in my back, which is not uncommon. Lots of people have those, but for some reason, what happened to me was pretty debilitating. I ended up in hospital a few times. I ended up one morning, woke up and I couldn't feel my legs. I sort of crawled across the floor. I was alone at that time. I crawled across the floor to try and get to the door, pulled myself up using the door handle and the sort of side of the table and sort of let go and just collapsed on the floor. Just thought I'd paralysed myself. I often would wake up in the night just screaming in pain. I mean, I was having like NHS care and stuff, but I think the thing was I was 29 at the time. I was fit, I was stubborn and determined. And I think they kind of saw that in my eyes. And so I worked really, really bloody hard to sort of get better. In hindsight, I was told, I probably should have had surgery, blah, blah, blah. But, I'd gone through months and months of agony. I remained pretty optimistic and I got back to surfing after about 4 or 5 months. I still had pretty bad nerve pain, but I was just, my focus was my life, which was my hobbies, my physical hobbies. And then after, I don't know, maybe about 10 months or sort of back on the bike, back on the surfboard, thinking, well, that was it. I actually sneezed and I had obviously all the back spasms and the shooting pain down the leg again. And I think that was like the most crushing thing, because I thought this would never happen again. And it did. It was obviously nowhere near as bad, but it opened up this vulnerability to me, and it happened. I kind of tried to carry on, and I went surfing like a couple of months later, and came off awkward, and it went again. And I went for a journey of several years. I spent thousands of pounds seeing different trainers or hands-on treatment people to try to fix me. I was constantly told, once your back goes, that's it. I had a lot of negative words said to me, which made me feel weak and vulnerable, I guess. And I just became scared to move, really. Became like a bit of a stiff board. My personality, which was really outgoing, bubbly and fun, became sort of very scared and sort of guarded. And I spent years searching. I just, I was at despair, and I didn't realize at the time. I always thought there was some sort of super stretch I was missing, or something else, or why was this sort of like the way it was? And the pain wasn't actually that bad. 2 years in, I mean, I still couldn't sleep on my left hand side, but it was bearable. I could work, and I could walk and swim. I took up swimming in a big way, but I couldn't do my surfing. I couldn't do my riding. And so a big part of me had died, basically, my big personality. And a lot of me at that point was questioning sort of the value of life, really. And, sometimes I just, I wasn't like suicidal, but I remember I had counselling, and I had to fill in a form that said, have you ever had suicidal thoughts? And I had to put yes. At that point, I just broke down in tears, because I thought, shit, this has got so bad that I've actually even considered I don't want to live my life any longer. And I had like a year and a half of counselling and stuff, which was all NHS, which was great and stuff, but it didn't really quite go far enough. And I was still kind of a bit of a wreck, really, in so many ways. And sort of my life became smaller and smaller in terms of what I was prepared to do. But, what are we now, 12, 13 years on? I'm not healed. I've got some physical and psychological damage, but, I'm a million miles away from where I was. And I had a long journey to get to where I am now, really. And the big thing is, what was funny in hindsight was it wasn't the physical journey, it was the emotional journey, which is what healed me. My mum would always say stuff like, "Oh, darling, you're probably just feeling a bit worse because you're a bit stressed." And I'd be like, "Oh, thanks, mum. You mean well, but I got half a bloody back hanging out. That's not the way it works." But lo and behold, it is, in a funny way. But it took professionals that I trusted for me to actually go down the journey of even though I'd had all the counselling and stuff, it took a journey of physical trainers who I trusted to kind of say, we got to sort out your head, and for a series of interesting kind of events, we got there. I went to, touching on what Brad said about the whippet, so many people say, I mean, I'm 6 foot 11 stone, probably about 12% body fat, despite all the amount of food I eat. People always say, hey, if you got a bit stronger, if you put on a bit more weight, then you'd probably be all right, or it would never have happened.
Who said that?
I think Brad said it about 100 times to me. So. I think a lot of people said it, like meaning well. My partner said it a lot, and I'm just not sort of like name and shame because she's cared. She's for me so much. She's been through an awful lot with me in this journey, but they're trying to help, and they're trying to think of ways in which to help you. And I know some of my friends said it as well. Like, I can't remember exact, people sort of like exactly, but it was a common thing because people would look at me and they would see my frame, and they would know that I had a bad back. They would say, well, if you got stronger, you'd be all right.
Can I come in there with two things if I can remember them both? And thing number one, Aaron, I promise I'm not just trying to blow smoke up your ass. To anyone that is listening to this rather than watching it, I've long thought about you, Aaron, that you look so clean and healthy, and you're tall and you've got a good frame. You remind me of the kind of person that would model, but for Marks and Spencer's. So like a really clean cut kind of image. I can see you in a cardigan. When they put men that are far too young in the clothes designed for like the 60-year-olds to make those 60-year-olds think, oh, I'd look like that young man if I bought that cardigan in a triple XL. So that's what Aaron actually looks like. And then the second thing was, this might be gobbledygook, but see if you can understand where I'm going with it. That one of the things that happens when people report any kind of difficulty or problem, especially when it's around their mental health, is that people try to fix. People try to say what you should do. They try to advise and say, this is what you should do, that's what you should do. Whereas in a lot of cases, and I don't know whether it's in your case, that's really what I'm asking, what people actually want in terms of their mental health is actually just to be heard and to be seen and validated in that way, rather than someone, I mean, Brad uses a lovely phrase about listening to understand rather than listening to reply. So does that chime with you? Is that more what you wanted when you were talking to people rather than expecting your mum to mend your back?
It's a funny one because we're all different. I wear my heart on my sleeve, like, you know, and if I was having a bad day with my back, everyone would know about it, and you feel like a broken record. And I don't know, why was I saying all those things? I think I'm the sort of person that needs a hug. I need an arm put around me, somebody to tell me it's going to be all right, you know. And I guess that's kind of what I was doing. It's almost to validate that we're still here for you, because I just felt so lonely. You know, I was going through this journey on my own. And the funny thing is, with like something like a physical, well, any pain, emotional, physical, that people go to, unless you've got a plaster cast around you, but even then, people don't really feel that pain. They can't see. There's nothing visual for them really to know how much you're going through. And even now, if someone tells me they got a bad back, I just kind of go, yeah, whatever, you know, and that's fine. It's fine, you know, but it's, you're in that dark place yourself, and there's only so much time somebody can be in a dark place for until it starts to really screw them up.
Yeah.
You know, so I think the thing is, you know, part of the journey I had to get better was I needed to come to a place where I was ready to listen to people. You know, and I've said this to some people that when I had some accelerated periods of sort of mental development, which was really, really good over the course of maybe like a year. And that was a culmination of a number of things. You know, the hypnotherapy, like I said, that Brad gave me, I'd read a lot of books that all linked together. We had lockdown. So I had all of a sudden this time out. And the thing for lockdown was I was safe. You know, I wasn't being asked to go places. I wasn't being asked to travel long distances, which would freak me out, or do activities which would tend to freak me out. It was me, Becky and the boys, and all we could do was go for walks. And I felt safe, you know. So I had all of these things to come together. I had more time to sleep and rest. So all of a sudden, everything fell into place. You know, so all the things that happened previously that people had told me, or things I'd read, or things I'd actually learned on the way, they just all of a sudden fell into place. And then when it did, I felt like, it sounds a little bit sort of egotistical, but I felt like I'd been given this gift to go around and share it with everybody else, and tell them that, hey, it doesn't matter what your problem is. If your problem's a bad back, or problem at work, or problem with a partner, I've got a great way to fix it. You know, and it was the thing. And I remember saying to somebody that I referred over to Brad, she said to me, you know, I'm not in a great place. And I said, I don't need to know what it is. I said, you're just not firing on all cylinders. And you know, there's a way that you're not firing on cylinders is basically, you know, this analogy of there's just too much for you to deal with. We have to lighten that load, and you have to start putting yourself first, you know. And it is almost the same, that a problem with someone's mental health, it doesn't really matter what it is necessarily. The solution to that is often the same, which is the ability to be able to share what you're going through and have some clear guidance from people, but be in a position to accept that guidance. And I think that's the critical thing, is for a number of people I've sort of spoken to, I can see that they're not interested in hearing what I've got to say, which is absolutely fine, because they're not in that place yet, but they will be in time. And I think that's the thing as well, to be kind to yourself, that if you are in a really, really bad place, you know, you will, through your own, it's your journey, you will get to a place where you are ready. And when you are ready, you need to have that network around you.
I think it's, you know, it's really important what you said there. Just having to come in about that idea of acceptance, I think is so important, that you're ready to do it. And, I guess that comes a lot in hypnotherapy. Like people would only come and see me when they're ready to. It's not like you go around trying to convince people to do it. And the most kind of apparent form of that, which I've had lots of recently, is people come in to stop smoke. And I always have to check, like, is this you? Do you want to stop, or are you doing this for somebody else? Because if you're doing it for someone else, it's not going to work. It's about your own intent, and I guess the same is kind of true there. Like, you reaching that point of actually being in a position where you're like, right, I am ready to accept whatever I can sort of take, whatever I can be told, whatever is going to help. I think is really, really important. And that whole idea of just sharing with people and being accepting, I just think is really important. And that can take a lot of time. And I think that's something that's becoming apparent about your journey, is that maybe that took longer coming than you kind of originally thought it might, or you would, in reflection, would have wanted it to.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I look back and think, how could that have happened quicker? And I think it still would have taken time, even if you were armed with all that information, because you have to go through that journey, even if I was guided in the right direction from the start. But I say it's yourself. Somebody might come to that sort of place it took me sort of 4 years to get to within 4 months. But that doesn't matter. But I mean, just going back to some of the points from the original sort of question, one of the key things I think as well that are really important to share, and again is a common thing, is my wife was bored of hearing about my problems, and so I didn't get the sympathy from her, and it was tearing us apart, and she said to me, you need to sort this situation out, or else it's gonna ruin us, so what I ended up doing was, not intentionally, but I phoned my brother who lives 250 miles away. We've always had a close relationship, but with busy lives don't talk as much. But I just told him what she said, and I just broke down in tears. And he said, mate, you phone me every single day on your way back from work, and you just tell me whatever you want to tell me, and I'll listen. And we did that. I can't remember for how long, probably for months. And I phoned him every single day. And I mean, the guy is just like a saint. He's just so patient and so caring. That I unloaded all of that emotion and energy that I'd been wanting to share with people that I hadn't been able to, because I didn't want to burden people with it. And I knew quite rightly that these people didn't need to want to listen to it. So again, I've said to some people, if they've got a problem, if they can find somebody else that isn't their partner, and you can focus on having a good, solid relationship with your partner, enjoying fun times rather than just sort of dwelling on the negative sides, you're still going to be lifted in your day-to-day life with your relationship, which I think is really, really important.
And what's really interesting about that, Aaron, is that you said about your mum as well, with her saying that she's sure you just kind of feel a little bit down at the moment, or a little bit stressed, but actually it was a really significant injury. So my background in mental health is that I deliver mental health first aid courses. And one of the things that I tell people on the courses is that, and a load of people sadly come onto the course because they want to learn to help support somebody in their lives. And it's at that point where I tell people, actually, supporting someone that you're really close to, like in a relationship with, or if they're a direct family member of yours, like a mother and son relationship, that's a really hard person to provide mental health support to, because you have to step outside of your relationship in order to do that. You have to take that hat off where you are that person's wife or mother or husband or father, in order to just be able to see the problems that they're telling you without trying to offer a solution. Because actually, as we've discussed already, a lot of mental health support isn't about offering a solution. It's just about offering a pair of listening ears to hear that. Whereas what it sounds like your brother was able to do is step outside of his relationship with you as a brother and just hear what it was you needed to share. And I think that's a really powerful message for people.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that was the almost like the step one is the unloading. So for years and years of sort of pain, like emotional pain, it was the unloading. The step two for this really was reversing the mindset. And again, this is what came out of the stuff with Brad. And the first session with Brad and then hip therapy, it was I had this list I'd written down of all the things I wanted to talk about, all the problems that I was having. And he said to me, he sat me back slightly, said, I don't want to hear about your problems. I know about your problems. and I don't need to know about. And what we need to do is shift that mindset. And again, this comes back to my interpretation of the chimp paradox, is that, your chimp, the paradox of the chimp thing is obviously that can be your best friend and your worst enemy. When it's freaking out, it's behaving badly. And for me, I've named my chimp. My good friend Maynard, who introduced me to it, said, "You've got to name your chimp." So I named my chimp. I call him Dino for some reason. But, and he says to me, "Oh, I don't like worry, Dino." So when I'm panicking about something, we kind of make light of that. But, the other thing is when my chimp is firing all cylinders and I'm acting like a bit of a kid and I'm ultimately super, super happy, then I'm loving life, so long as I'm not offending anybody. That's the way I want to be. And I think the thing is bringing that out. So the big thing with Brad was, when we did the hypno, was, he asked me to rank myself out of 10. And I was like, I think on the first one, so I was like 3. List three good things that have happened in the last week. And I probably, what felt like ages silence, probably like 30 seconds or so, I listed some things which I felt were pretty shit. 10 weeks later or whatever, I was a 10 out of 10. And the list of 3 was coming out like this, but they weren't any things different to what I was doing previously. It was just how I was perceiving what I was doing in life. And that's the key thing. And what I'd like to link back to in terms of, if anybody's listening to this thinking, how can they help somebody that they know is in trouble? It may not be that they want to unload, and it may be that person needs to move on from unloading to then thinking about the positive aspects of life. And an easy way to do that is with WhatsApp. Send me your 3 daily highlights every day before you go to bed. And I still do that with mates. I do it for myself when I'm having a bit of a wobble. I contact them and say, "Hey, I'm having a bit of a wobble. Do you mind if we just do highlights?" So sometimes they're like, "Yeah, you send me yours. I haven't got time to do mine, but you just keep sending mine." And that gives an element of accountability for you to reflect back on your day. And the things aren't great. I mean, sometimes they are, but sometimes they're just like, I had like a little break where I had a nice cup of tea and a bit of chocolate, sat in the sun, or my boys sort of like gave a big cuddle, and you reflect back on that. And again, an interesting thing is, a mate of ours, again, had a really bad back. He was going for a bad time, and I sort of like was quite cagey and trying to sort of pass too much advice, as it were, because he was on his own journey. But again, I just said to him, "Hey, you're going through a really, really bad time. I can tell that. Let's do these daily highlights." So we sent each other our daily highlights at the end of each day for months. And the first time I sent it to him, I think I tried to tone it down. For anyone listening, I am back surfing, I am back riding, so I'd probably gone for like an 8-hour surf or something, but I didn't tell him that. I probably told him that I'd had my cup of tea in the sun and like had a cuddle from my son or something. But so he replied back saying, "Oh, your day sounds amazing. I don't think mine's going to be any good compared to yours." He goes, "But here goes." And he listed his 3 and then signed it off saying, "Oh shit, this does work, doesn't it? I instantly feel better just by looking back on what I have actually achieved and what's actually happened, rather than just thinking about those negative aspects of what's happened in his day and what he's going through in his life."
It's so awesome. I'm so glad you shared that. And again, a couple of things that come to mind. And Nibbo, I know you're going to agree with me, because this is something we keep coming back to every episode. Something that I think is really important for us as men to find or make or create is that safe environment. That safe environment to talk. And so that might not necessarily be our partner or our mum or whoever it might be. It might be a friend, it might be a brother, but actually working out where that safe environment is to be able to talk is really, really crucial. And I love that not only have you kind of discovered that yourself, but you're now actively going out and creating safe environments for people. What you're essentially doing is creating network. And I just think that's so important, because once we do that, we realize kind of how powerful that is. And I knew you were going to talk about the 3 good things, because it's such a simple and such an effective technique. And it's so important. You're so right. Everything I do within hypnotherapy is around creating that positive mindset. And it's moving away from focusing on the problem, which is what, sometimes we get stuck focusing on the problem. There's a really good analogy that I sometimes share with people about a cat being, the little carry boxes people put cats in to take them to the vet. This idea of a cat in one of those carry boxes and the lid's off. and the cat is just facing the cage door of the carry box, meowing, desperate to get out. But it doesn't even see that the roof isn't on. It's so focused on the fact that the door is shut, it can't see its way out of the box. And that's what people get into. And that whole process that you talked about flicking from focusing on the problem to trying to focus on the solution, has such a dramatic impact on people's lives. And then to be able to focus on positive things, and great how you put it, that actually those positive things are all there. They're still there. Even when you're in dark places, those positive things are there. We're just not seeing them because we're so focused on the problem. We see all the negatives that surround the problem. We miss all of that good stuff. And that's really important. And I've got one final analogy just before, because I know Nibbo's chomping at the bit to come in with something really wise and wonderful like he always does. The part of our brain that is concerned with is something called our reticular activation system. So when we're in a not great place and we have a problem, we start to focus in on all of the other problems, and so our mind, even without us thinking about it, picks out other threats, other problems that keep us in that really negative state and that primitive mind that you rightly spoke about. But when we flip that and we start to focus on solutions and the positive things, our brain then tunes into that. And the analogy part for that is, if you're going to change a car, and I say this to clients all the time, if you're going to change a car, what you do is you start off scanning, you have a look on the internet, and then you decide, actually, I'm going to go for, I don't know, whatever it is. Let's go for something fancy. I'm going to go for an Audi A4. And then the minute you've made that decision, you're going for an Audi A4, you see them bloody everywhere. They're in the car parks, they're in the school run, they're on the motorway, they're on the roads, they're at the beach. They're everywhere because your brain, even without thinking about it, is tuned into that, and your thought process is exactly the same. So, the great bit about what I do is actually it's encouraging people to start to focus on those positives in exactly the way that you've described, because then the negative stuff starts to just blur out into the background, and you're buzzing over that cup of tea and that sit in the sunshine and that little bit of chocolate you had and the cuddle that the kids gave you that before you couldn't see. So it's really, really powerful stuff, and I just think you articulated it really well. Hopefully Nibbo hasn't forgot his point now.
No, I haven't forgot my point, but I think it's a really, really important point. Following on from what you said, Aaron, about find a safe space to talk to someone, and I'm just aware that some of our listeners may feel as if they don't have someone that can hold that space for them in their lives. And we have the option of putting a little bit of detail in a blurb for this episode. So we will make sure that in this episode, the blurb for this episode, there are details for Talk Club is a thing that I've used, and that is a safe space for men to talk about their mental health. And I've done it, and the structure of it is slightly different to the ones that we've discussed, but it's 4 rounds, and the beneficial impacts on me were huge. Just like, I certainly wouldn't say that it saved my life, but it definitely changed my life. So there will be details of Talk Club in the blurb for this episode.
Is that free?
Yeah, totally free. It's a charity. They're across the southwest and then pushing out of the southwest. Started off in Bristol, so we'll put details of that, and then we'll see if we can find a national. Although really, once people know the idea of Talk Club, there's other similar ones around the country. There's definitely Andy's Man Shed, or is it Andy's Man Club?
Andy's Man Club.
There's Andy's Man Club. There's a shed one as well.
Yeah, there's Man Down
all across the country. Yeah, Man Down.
If I can just ask, because you said you've used them, it feels like I flipped it now and I'm interviewing you. But as somebody who's obviously gone through what I consider some pretty serious mental health issues over the years, I would never have reached out to something like that, because I felt like stuff like that was literally for someone who was holding a knife to their wrist about to kill themselves. What I think would be really useful is to hear that that's actually not the case, and it could be as simple as the conversations like I was having with my brother.
My God. Right, so with Talk
if
Club...
I'm right.
with Talk Club, there are 4 rounds. I'll see if I can remember them. Firstly, it's how are you out of 10? And I started going to Talk Club, by the way, because I saw it on Facebook. It was as simple as that. And I knew I wasn't feeling like I was in a good place. I had had some really searching conversations with my wife at the time, who I'm no longer with, but that's a good outcome. That's been better for both of us. But I had some really searching conversations with her, and I'd worked out I'm really not in a good place here. And it felt like a simple and easy and cheap, if I'm totally honest, way to start learning about what's going on with me here. And it was after that I engaged with Brad and the hypnotherapy. But they have 4 rounds. One is how are you feeling out of 10? The next is what are you grateful for? The next is what are you going to do for your mental health this week? And then the last round is just how are you feeling out of 10 again? Mm-hmm. And then usually people improve how they're feeling out of 10 just over the course of a session, because they've realised what they're grateful for, they've realised what they can do for their mental health, and then that's helped them to feel better. But when you say, is it for people just with a knife to their wrist at the time? Absolutely not. I've been there at times when how I've been at the start of the session was I've been like a 7 out of 10, and I finished it an 8 out of 10, which is a small incremental rise, but I didn't start in a negative place. And then the weird thing is, which is proper bitchy of me, but here it is that one of the things I'm always grateful for is I see these men, and I think this is such a man-style problem. I see these men that, from what I can see of them, have got it sorted out. They're either in great shape, or they've got a really expensive watch dangling off their wrist, or they're dressing really well, or they've just got the best trainers on. Just these men that I would look at in a pub and think, this guy's got it sorted. And then when he shares, I realise, we are all in this same boat together. We're all as fucked up / not fucked up as each other. And actually, at the end of this, I would probably take my problems home. If we all put our problems in the middle and said, right, now take anyone's problems home, it's usually my own that I would have taken home after that. So it kind of makes, one of the things I say that I'm thankful for is like, hey, you lot are as fucked up as I am. Isn't that good? But I always start from that place of thinking, oh God, I'm gonna be like the guy here that's in the worst shape, that's the poorest, that's doing the least well in life generally. And then you realise, no, that's just an internalized view, and actually everyone else is in a really similar boat to you.
And this is where it comes back to our thought processes, doesn't it? And it's so important that we choose to see that positive stuff, and because that causes our brain to release serotonin, which is what makes us feel good, which helps keep us out of the primitive mind and into the intellectual mind. But it's so important. And I even had this conversation with Bowden, my 7-year-old, only yesterday, because we had the bizarre experience, and you both know what it was because I sent you videos. The maddest experience where we went paddleboarding, and it was insane. We always see the seals where we go. We love it. Like, they're really playful. They come up to the board. And as you saw in the videos, we had this seal climb up on the board, which has never happened before. And it was like such an incredible moment. Like, we were living our best lives at that point on the water. This wild creature is chilling out on the end of your board, and then it was jumping off, and it was going over to the other board and getting on that, and it was just this whole mad interaction, and we were blown away. And then some other kayakers came around the corner, and they'd seen us interacting with the seal, they'd seen it on the board, and we just thought, like, God, isn't this amazing? And then the seal was like, okay, cool, like, people are cool, I'm going to go and see these new people. Well, I've never seen 3 people paddle so quickly to get away. And it was hilarious. In the first burst, like, the dad was gone. He was gone. He didn't care about the wife or the daughter. He was like out of there. And then the seal caught him up anyway, tried to climb on the daughter's paddleboard.
Obviously.
And then the dad's over there like shouting at it and waving his paddle. And then so it jumps off, or it wasn't quite on, but it sort of disappeared back into water. And then by which point the mums thought, like, right, it's distracted by those two. I'm gone. So like she was and I said to Bowden on the way back, I said to him, do you see how important your thoughts are there? Because we've just had the best experience with that seal ever. Like, and we're genuinely all buzzing. And they've had exactly the same experience with exactly the same friendly seal, but they've thought about every worst case scenario that could happen in that, whereas we thought about every amazing, like just unbelievable thought that we could have. The event's the same. It's exactly the same event, but it's our thoughts that change how we perceive that event. And that's what's so important about just being able to talk and chat and Aaron, your ideas around just share three good things. And I know how actively you do that with people. I just think it's a really good point to kind of come on to. So, yeah, amazing. Right.
I think, sorry, if I
yeah,
can,
go on. Go on.
I've actually written notes. How great's this? But a couple of things just about my own personal journey. So I think it's probably pretty clear, but the biggest mental health issue I've suffered with is anxiety around the back. And, that's then linked into sort of general health anxiety. And anyone going through a journey of anything around anxiety, it's not linear. You don't all of a sudden sort of get to a point where you no longer get anxious about that. And stuff triggers me, stuff that scares me about my back triggers me quite often, but it's the ability to be able to control your mind process around that. And one of the extremes of that, obviously I might get twinges or pains or aches or whatever else. I have crutches that I lean on, which recently I thought were really bad. I have a really, really great hands-on sort of bone therapist over in Newquay, who's been huge in my transformation. So I know I've got that, and that's not a bad thing. I think to lean on, I always thought it was a bad thing, but I don't think, if that person can help me, it is. But also, so that can help the physical side, but the psychological side, obviously, generally you're in control of. And that's where you have to pull on your tools that you've learned over time. And often I will get so panicky that I will not be able to think rationally. And I will have to constantly remind myself about all of the things in my toolbox to go through. And it will take time. It might take 24 hours. It might take a week. But I know I'll get back to that place where I'm firing all cylinders again and I feel fantastic. But it's not for people to beat themselves up if they go into a slump. And a great sort of like recent example for me is I do still come off my bike. Now, obviously that sends me into total terror. Sometimes when I come off, I'll have a crash and I can deal with it because I understand that there's other things in my life that aren't really impacting my mental health. I feel pretty relaxed. Other times I might come off and the crash might not be so bad, but I just can't handle it. It's just spilled my stress bucket overflowing. And again, it's accepting and understanding that and sort of almost being kind to yourself. And I think that's the biggest thing is throughout part of my journey, I have an awful lot of guilt around what's happened for some reason. I think a lot of it was people kind of saying, well, you've done too much, you kind of brought it on yourself, or you should have done this, you should have done that. And so you have this sort of self-guilt. But again, I think the really important thing is not to put guilt on yourself for whatever happens. Even if you have completely fucked up, that's life. And you learn from that, or even if you don't learn from it, it doesn't matter. No one lives a perfect life. And I think the thing is if you're only ever in a bad state and you feel like you're in a downward curve, just accept that time is going to be your greatest sort of like asset there. And it may be that you don't want to draw on your tools for another 12, 24 hours. Just accept that you've got to be in that moment. But as soon as you possibly can, start reflecting on back to those things that and draw on those different sort of pots of information and people that you've got available to you.
I think that we're leading really nicely into our next Would You Rather, but just before we do, is there anything else you want to add? You referenced your tools there. And I think you've given us quite a lot in terms of things that you do, like, unloading, focusing on the positives, three good things. Is there anything else in your toolbox that you want to share before we go on to your next Would You Rather?
It probably is. It's not a loaded question, is it?
No.
No. There will be, for sure. I mean, there is for everybody. I think there's a few things. What was really interesting was the chap you had on Mike, who I don't know, but I listened to your previous session, and something that I've done before. He said it's okay to say no. and this idea that actually, if something's going to stress me out, adding more things to that, it's all right just to say no to people, and you don't have to come up with some bullshit excuse. You can just say, I'm not feeling great. I'm not in a good place for my mental health. People are going to take that better than I haven't got any money or I'm really busy or something like that. You're being honest. And I think that's the key thing, is if you're honest with somebody like that, you're not stressing yourself out by thinking, I've had to make up some crap excuse that they might believe, but also it's just giving you that headspace. So again, it's being kind to yourself, I think, to empty that sort of bucket of things that are going in and sort of overflowing it. This is personal stuff. I do yoga and stuff. I'm not a big drinker. I find drinking's not helped me. But again, I wouldn't turn to alcohol if I was having a bad time. I did in the past, not critically so, like just a pint or two, but you just wake up the next morning feeling shit. I do a lot of breathing apps, free stuff online, but again, just to control your breathing. Get out in nature, change sort of like the place that you're at, and actually see people. Sometimes I've felt really, really shit, and I might be in an environment with certain people and still feel shit, and then you might go and do something else, and actually that somehow tick the box, and there's no sort of like rule for that. But again, I think the thing is, if you can get away from where you are, if you're not feeling great, and you're with other people or you're on your own, whatever you need to do, just that change of what's stimulating your brain can help.
Yeah, cool. Sure. Awesome. Wow. Well, there it is, guys. What a part one. I mean, I promised you at the beginning it was going to be action-packed, and it really was jam-packed of really good advice. Loved hearing about Aaron's story and the journey that I'd been on. But don't fear, part 2 will be available next Sunday. You'll hear more about his would you rathers, and we'll unpick some of the emotions that he has experienced and his learning along the way. And then you'll also hear some of the advice that he would give to his younger self and things I would ask his older self. So I promise you, part 2 is going to be just as awesome as part 1. So yeah, you're going to have to sit tight for another week, but I promise you it'll be worth the wait, because part 2 is going to be awesome as well. See you then.